Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 642. Today we're going to take a look at Victorian Masterminds. This is a new game that's just coming out right about now from CMON Inc. It's designed by Eric Lang and Antoine Bowser. So Eric Lang has done Blood Rage, Rising Sun, all kinds of games. Antoine Bowser has done a bunch of games, most notably Seven Wonders. So they've teamed up and combined their forces to create this game. Now the theme of the game is interesting. Basically, Sherlock Holmes has gone missing. And this is set sort of in the Victorian area, and it's Victorian Masterminds. And all the players are sort of these evil doers who are trying to build these kind of doomsday devices, blow up various buildings in London and all over Europe and things, and try to do bad stuff and score a bunch of victory points as they do it. So the game plays 2 to 4 players. Let me jump in and tell you how it works. It's a pretty simple game in terms of like the real core mechanic of it, of what you're doing on your turn. But there's kind of a lot to consider and take in. So let's jump in and look at how it works, and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, so I've got all the components kind of laid out here. It's a little bit tricky actually to shoot for a video. The main thing that you've got in the game here is this sort of long, skinny board. So each section of this board will represent a various different city in Europe, and you lay this out. And then you want to put this kind of tracking, this firepower tracker at the very, very top way up here. So I'll just kind of zoom in different parts of it, but that's kind of your main layout. Each player could be sitting on either side of it. They're going to have a doomsday kind of board here. This is a cardstock thing. There are more of these than the number of players in the game, so you can definitely mix and match these. They have asymmetrical powers, so to speak, with their engineers, which I'll explain in a second. But you're going to get the tiles that match kind of the background color there. So I grabbed all of these green tiles here. So you're going to take these, and these are all different parts of your Doomsday Device. So as you sort of take actions to build these, you'll cover these up. And you can see once I cover this up, then I'll have unlocked this here for a bonus 5 points at the end of the game. And there's other different things you can unlock, which I'll show you. Each player is going to get 1 scientist to start with. These are kind of ways to mitigate the different actions that you can do. And you also get cogs in your player card, which don't necessarily match the color on your Doomsday Device. So everybody's going to have this same stack of cogs, and these are going to be different little sort of workers or minions that you're going to send out, and they all do different things, but everybody has the same exact set. So on your turn, it's basically shuffle these up to start the game. You draw one, you get to look at it and figure out, okay, I've got the little building destroyer later here, so where should I put her out? You take and put her on one of these spots here in one of the cities, and then that's basically your turn. You're going to draw a new cog, figure out where you want to put it, and then put it down. Now you're going to always put them face down, and then as other players come along, they're going to start to put stuff out. Maybe they'll put stuff on top of your stuff, or you'll put stuff on top of theirs. As soon as one of these stacks has 3 cogs on it, you're going to pause play, you're going to flip these over, and then resolve those different pieces in order. And then once you've resolved all the different actions and effects of those, you're just going to keep moving around the table, and you're going to keep playing until you've destroyed a certain amount of buildings, and depending on the number of players, or one of the players completes their Doomsday Device. Once that happens, everybody gets another turn, including the player that triggered the end of the game, and then you're going to score points in a whole bunch of different ways. So let's just walk through what all of these things do, and then by walking through all of the different cogs that you get, that will give you an idea of how the game works. So the first thing to know is that like I said, you put these cogs out, and once there's a third one on there, you flip them up. Each of these different workers is going to do different things based on this little icon at the bottom. What they will all do is collect a resource from the city indicated here. So in this case, all of these workers are always going to collect these little kind of nails or screws here. Now, if they were up here, then you would collect one of these books here, which are just worth a point, and they also have a little special ability once you collect 5 of them. And you can also get an ability to upgrade and collect them, and they'll be worth 2 points. So in each of these different spaces, you're going to collect a different thing. And if you go here, then you'll be collecting one of these scientists, which again, I'll explain in a little bit. And in this spot, you're going to collect the other side of these parts tokens. So on this side, you've got the bolt there, screw, and then on the other side is this kind of orange paper looking thing. So depending on which spot you go, you're going to collect these. These are going to go onto your device, which I'll show you. And then finally, you can go here and move up the firepower track. So here we've got the firepower track. You're going to put all the player markers on the spot where you have the number of players. So if you're playing a 2-player game, these little tokens will start there, 3 and 4 player. So every time you move your firepower up, you're going to go up and up this track. You're going to have this one here, which is also going to start at the same spot based on the number of players. And then anytime that a building is destroyed and comes off the board like so, this is just going to tick up, because this is showing like the Secret Service forces and their readiness to combat all the terror that you guys are enacting. So every time somebody blows a building up, they get a little bit more ticked off, basically. And again, one of the ways that the game can end is once this hits the 12, that will then trigger the end of the game. Everybody gets another turn. Now, in addition to collecting the resource of the spot, no matter which character you put here, you're also going to do the special ability of that character. So let's just go ahead and go through all of the blue characters here. This gal here, she's going to multiply whatever she was collecting by 2. And so in this case, she would collect 2 bolts or go up 2 firepower and so on. This one here will actually cancel the special ability of the cog that's underneath it if it's another player's. You won't cancel your own, but let's say this was another player under here. He would collect his bolt and then cancel this, and then she would still collect her bolt, but her times 2 ability gets canceled by his cancel ability. So they still collect the resource, but they don't get to do the special thing. And then this one here has like a little kind of a book or card looking thing. And what this means is that if you can complete this mission, and there's a different mission card on, let's move up here, each of these spots. And at the start of the game, it's always the same 5 mission cards. To start the game, they have these different kind of backs, but it's random where they go. And then after that, once you start completing missions, you're going to pull cards out of this stack, which is, there's quite a few more of these, and these are going to come out. And you get points for completing these. So if you resolve her, you collect the good there, or whatever she's going to get. And then you look at the mission and say, well, can I complete that? I've got the mission gal here. And this one says, if I've destroyed any building, then I get the mission. And this is going to be worth here 2 points at the end of the game. Let's just grab a random one out of here. And this one tells you there's certain upgrades on your Doomsday Device that are marked with different symbols. This is if you've completed one with the X symbol, then you can complete this mission and you get 3 points. And there's a bunch of things like that. So that's the mission gal. And then this one here will tell you that you may destroy a building, but only if you are further along on the firepower track than the current place where the Secret Service is. And in that case, then if you are, you go, okay. And then you pick one of the buildings you want to destroy. Now these 3 here are the same in every city, and then there's like a unique one here. Some of these mission cards will ask you if you've destroyed a specific kind of building and so on, but you just pick one of these. These are worth 2 points at the end of the game, no matter which one you destroy, and then you're going to get a bonus based on which one. So this one allows you to get one of these little scoring tokens like that. These are always worth 2 points at the end of the game as well, so effectively these special ones are at least worth 4 points, if not more, for bonus cards. This one you get a scientist, this one you get the little blueprint, and then this one you get the bolt when you destroy those buildings. So that's the building destroying thing. And remember, every time you destroy a building, you need to move up the Secret Service up the track. That's something that I've seen forgotten multiple times. And then finally here we have the engineer, which is going to vary based on your special Doomsday Device. So let's take a look at that. So here's the Doomsday Device called Mephisto. Again, these are all different and unique. So as you start to complete different sections, you're going to get different abilities. So once I fill this up, I'm going to get +3 immediately to my firepower. Well, how do you build these? Well, this is what the bolts and the blueprints are for. So as you collect these, you're going to put them wherever you want on this board here. And so maybe I was getting the bolts and then I got this. And as soon as I do that, then I go ahead and fill that in like so. And the other thing you can see, remember I said there was like different symbols. So this one is a triangle. Whereas this one, if you completed this one here, that's this little component there, and this one is an X. So if you completed that and you had this mission and so on, you've completed one of the X's, then you can get that bonus there. So you start to fill this stuff in, and away you go. Now the other thing to keep in mind here is you have this sort of area where scientists are stored. You start the game with one of these. You can get a second one, but you have to unlock these spots here to get more scientists. You're kind of limited to the amount that you can get. As you sort of unlock these, you can get more off to the side here. Now what do the scientists actually do? Well, on your turn, when you're placing your cogs out on the board, you're doing the worker placement part, you can sort of break the rule, because it is kind of random, right? Because you just draw one off the top, you look at it, you get to pick where you put it, but you don't really get to choose which one you're going to put out. So these will help you sort of mitigate that. So on your turn, if you spend one scientist, then instead of just drawing off the top, you can then grab any scientist you want out of your discard pile. Well, how does that work? Well, as you resolve the stacks, the cogs are going to come back to you that were placed, and then you're going to put these face up in a little discard pile like so. And then once you kind of run out of cogs to draw off your stack, then you're going to reshuffle those and put them back into your draw pile. So if you spend one scientist, you can then pick one of these scientists, one of these workers that you placed earlier, and then use that. If you spend two scientists, then you can play a second worker here out of your stack. Now it's worth noting that you can't do like multiple combos of these. Like you can't spend one and then two and do, one out of your discard and then do a second. You got to do one or the other of these. You can't combo these up. So again, draw a discard pile, play a second one, which can be very strong. And then this one, if you play three, you can destroy a building from any city. You still need to be able to beat it on power level and so on. But if you spend three, you can just immediately destroy a city right away. So that's how the scientists work. Now the engineers, which we talked about here, you can see this guy here's got the little engineer symbol, and they all start off with a different unique ability. And then what this one says is your engineer becomes a number 2. What that is the ×2 multiplier. So at the beginning of the game, it's like having a second one of these multipliers, so you can collect the resources very, very quickly. But then as you unlock the different parts of your Doomsday device here, so we've got here the blue hammers unlocked. What that means, you're going to get these little 2-point tokens every time you place your engineer, and that's what everybody's blue one does. If you get the green one, which is here, like so, once you've placed this one out, then you get another thing. So this one says your engineer becomes instead any other type of agent. So basically becomes a wild agent. You can have him still be a 2 multiplier there, but you could also have him be a cancel or whatever. So that's very effective, because then you can just cancel a whole bunch of stuff and be a real pain in the butt. You could have kind of like 2 building destroyers out there, pump up your firepower a lot, and then now you've got 2 building destroyers, and you can really leave people in the dust there. And then, or you could have like 2 missions and collect a bunch of missions. So this really is very effective. And I'll talk about this more in the review, but we had a very long discussion about which engineering powers were overpowered and which weren't. And the person who owned this one was swearing this one is not as powerful as one of the others. But having played with this again, this one's actually really good, especially with this whole cancelability thing. All right, so that's the engineers and the scientists. And then again, the only other thing over here are these books. So again, as you collect books, you're just gonna get them, you put them on the one side, and you go get books. These are just worth the number of points you can see there at the end of the game. Now, once you have upgraded this ability here, like so, then that means whenever you collect a book, it's now, instead of being a 1, it's going to be a 2. So it's a good idea to get that early on, because it's going to multiply a little bit better. And then once you get your 5th book, let's put another one out here. And then you can see, instead of drawing randomly from your stack of cogs, you can look through there, and then you can pick and choose, which cog you want to put out, so you're not having to deal with the randomness of that. So kind of getting the books early, or getting into the scientists early, can help you mitigate that, a little bit of that random draw stuff. So again, the other way to end the game, above and beyond the firepower track, is once somebody completes their final piece on one of these, then everybody gets this final turn, including the person that did it. And then you're going to go through and score points. So again, all the points that you see on your contraption here that you've unlocked, these are end of game points, 3, 5, 2. All the books you've got, any buildings you've collected are worth 2 points each here. And then of course, any of these little 2-point tokens that you've collected over the course of the game are worth points. And then any of these missions that you collected are worth points. And that's the game. You play till somebody completes one of these contraptions, or you can play until this hits the 12 mark on the power thing. That's it. Okay, so that is Victorian Masterminds. Let's break down to kind of the 3 pillars of reviews. The player count and the time are kind of go hand in hand. So the box says 45 to 60 minutes. And definitely it's going to be on the low end with 2 players and on the, a little bit on the higher end for 4. I could see it kind of going over an hour. I think I played it 4-player once and it went over an hour with like rules explanation and stuff, but once people play it, it'll go quicker. I have played it all 3-player counts, 2, 3, and 4. I like it with 3 and 4. I really actually don't like the game with 2 players at all. One thing that you can get is you can get to the point where like all the players have all their cogs out because it doesn't really like scale the size of the boards or anything. So when you play with 3 or 4 players, you're not really ever going to run into that problem. Certainly with 4, you never could. I don't think it's even mathematically possible with 3, but I could be wrong on that. And there's just not enough like interaction and sort of the different abilities running into each other and stuff like that with 2 players. It's really, I think, a 3 and a 4-player game only. So the one thing I could, well, I don't want to just speculate, but there's probably something they could do to make it 2-player, but why? It's really fun with 3 and 4 players. And so it's going to take you about an hour and all that stuff. So what would I compare it to as the last pillar of reviewing? I don't really know. I mean, it's kind of weird. I'm going to say this statement just because I think it's funny, but it feels more like an Antoine Bowser game than an Eric Lang game. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not really going to explain why. Because it just kind of does. I do know that there is an Antoine Bowser game that has this kind of thing where you build submarines or something like that, and you put pieces on and get special abilities. So that might be it, but I've never played that, so I wouldn't really know. Somebody told me that. But yeah, so there's that kind of thing. But I know it's really hard to like compare this to anything because it's worker placement. You're putting the workers, you're putting them face down. They're not doing anything. It may be actually a while before the one that you put down does anything because nobody else may place on top of it. So it could just sit out there for a little bit. And then some other spots could get activated, multiple times because I put on it, you put on it, Billy puts on it, boom, it's activated, we go. Sometimes there's like a daisy chain action that you can like trigger. There's one engineer where you can like take the engineer out of a stack that gets activated and move it to another stack. And that's where this little monocle of forgetfulness token comes into play. Once you trigger a stack, you give this to the person whose turn it is. So you can keep track after you've resolved all those abilities to know whose turn was it, because you're going to be resolving, different colored players all over the board, and you're going to remember whose turn it was. So this is really good to do that. So what do I think of the game? Like I said, I really like it at a 3 and 4. I think 4 is my favorite just because there's just a lot of craziness. I wouldn't like put this on like a really strategic thing, but it doesn't lack for strategy and getting to know the game in depth and replayability. Because once you start to kind of know all the different kind of engineering abilities, I think that partly is where the replayability and the depth of strategy and stuff is going to come into it. And we had a somewhat heated discussion about the different engineers, because the one I talked about where you can actually take the engineer out, you flip it over, you activate it, the engineer collects the resource, and then that engineer like teleports to another spot and gets in that stack. It goes under the top cog of that stack, which can immediately trigger that. That's fine. It's sort of like getting a free action, but like I showed you in the video walkthrough, there's the guy that can become any of the other workers that you can put out. It could become the canceller, which is like, screws you, because you're like, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna get this mission, and the one above you is a cancel, and you're like, well, that sucks, because all I'm getting is like a bolt, whoopity-doo. So you gotta be very careful about placing on top of other players' cogs, because you're like, I know they just put a cancel on there because, it's the first cog down. Why wouldn't they do that? But then you're like, well, they could probably do that mission. So probably they put a mission person on there. And you're like, well, they can also do these 2 other missions over here. So there's that kind of back and forth stuff. So I think that the one that this particular player had, Billy, his name's not Billy, is actually stronger than the other one. But of course, the one that had the one that you could move it around and won the game that we played. So there's another one that's like you can gain bolts and screws and choose any face-up mission that you can complete. So you can, when you place this engineer, you can complete any mission on the board as long as you can legally complete it. You don't have to place the mission person. That seems really strong because that's going to be like a bunch of points. Because the missions are not super difficult to complete, but again, you got to put that correct worker down and get it timed off, and hopefully that somebody else hasn't placed the mission worker underneath yours. So that seems very strong. This one allows you to gain and transform the books into twos, and also to actually gain a scientist when you do this engineer. Now, of course, this is actually after upgrading the engineers. So getting a scientist is huge because that gives you a lot of place to workers on your turn and so on. So that's big. This one, the engineer, you can capture a building with it, so they become a building destroyer. If you upgrade it to the green, then you get whatever that building gave you, like it gives you extra points or bolts, you get that 2 of whatever that is. That seems pretty good. And the buildings, again, are worth 2 points each at the end of the game. And they're also going to help you complete missions and stuff a lot easier, because some missions want certain types. That seems pretty good. This one is, this is the one I was talking about, where you can move the engineer under other stacks. And you can also get +1 firepower if you move it under one of yours, which is pretty strong. But does not make it more powerful than the others necessarily. I won't argue that it is not the most powerful engineer in the game. It might be, but there's a very easy way to fix that, is you pull that out of the game and don't play with it for a little while. So this other one is gain the spoil of another city where you have any agents. So you place this out, you get the spoil, which is the bolt or the firepower or whatever, and then anywhere you have another agent face down, you get whatever they get too. So you're going to get 2 of whatever that is, because you're going to end up flipping that stack and getting that again. That seems pretty good. And you can get it twice too once you upgrade it. And the last one here is the one I talked about already in the walkthrough. So there's a lot of cool varieties of the different agents and stuff. And I don't think this is the type of game that really should be, you shouldn't worry about it. Like, okay, let's say the one engineer is more balanced than the other, blah, blah, blah. Because there's more to the game, and the cancel abilities and all that stuff. You can kind of get in there and play around it. And there's going to be some kind of metagaming and player gaming that gets involved. But the game's kind of light enough and quick enough that if it's not perfectly balanced, which is also boring, then it's okay. I think it's okay because it's fun enough, and it's kind of like you're unwrapping this little surprise. You put the little workers out there, and you're like, what's in here? Oh, flip that over, and all these things never happen, So I like it. It's really fun. It's a straightforward kind of a gateway game, I would say. I think this could be a gateway game, right? If you know me, I watch the channel enough, I kind of hate that term. But there is enough going on that if you play a ton of games, that I think you're still going to like it. But the rules are so dead simple. Put the worker down. Once there's 3, flip them up and do the things. And that's it. And you build this cool machine, which I think, honestly, I don't know. I'm a weirdo, but I think anybody would like to build cool Doomsday devices and unlock stuff and get points. It seems like a fun thing. So I think I highly recommend this game to just about any gaming group because it's very quick. You can play it quick as a filler. I don't like it with 2-player though. And so as a filler, 4 players going to push that hour, I think. You're going to want to, so it kind of gets out of filler range. But if you have 3 people, or maybe even 4 that have played it a ton, and you want to kind of play like a blitz really fast, then you can play it as a filler and get into it. But there's a lot to explore here. I think it's going to be worth your money. The components are great and stuff. The cogs are chunky, and you have these excessive plastic buildings, which, I don't know, they're cool. You're blowing up a building. We're talking about, oh, these are so excessive, and everybody says they're excessive. I think even somebody at the publisher said they're kind of excessive. And I'm like, well, you're blowing up a building, so you want like your old trophy for the giant building you blew up. I don't know. They're kind of excessive. Not that bad. So yeah, I definitely recommend this. It's not going to be super heavy, super strategic, but it's got enough of that. It's simple enough and basic enough that anybody I think can pick this up, and I think it's intuitive enough that you're going to get into it. I guess the last thing I should mention is the theme. You can turn it off now. It's not really important. The theme is kind of wonky. There's some stuff that's thematic. I just say this because I had a similar discussion with another friend, and he didn't find it thematic at all. And I will say I don't find the mission cards very thematic because it's just like random. If you have one of this thing, get points, and it's like, okay, that's not really thematic. The rest of the game I kind of thought was thematic because you're building towards this Doomsday Device, and once you get it, theoretically you run amok with it and tear everything up, and that's going to signal the end of the game. The other end of the game where you have the firepower of the Secret Service, it's like, okay, once they get to 12, they're just like, okay, we've had it. We're just going to decimate all the villains. And so that's going to end the game. And then all the other little things and the little tricks and traps and stuff, and the way you kind of sneakily play the workers, and you're trying to, you're all villains, right? You're kind of on the same side, but you don't trust each other. And so the way that the worker placement stuff works, I think kind of lends itself to that. So generally I find it pretty thematic. There's a couple of things with like how you're scoring points off books and stuff and the missions that are sort of anti-thematic, but I don't think it's that bad. So I still get into the theme and get into that vibe. Yeah, so definitely take a look at Victorian Masterminds. Thanks.